Today we're going to find out what happened to the plants I received from Uprooted in my mystery plant box. It's day 30. Let's see what's going on. First up is my Farfugium Japonicum Argentinium. The first thing to note is that this plant is alive and it's still looking really, really good. So for that plant, just for that alone, I will say that that transition has been a success. Let's talk a little bit about what happened with this plant. I put this plant in Leca clay bowls and it seems to love it. Look at those leaves. That plant is looking just glorious. The leaves are intact, they're firm, and there has been some new growth. When you look at this one over here, a lot of the smaller ones are actually new growth. I'm really happy with how this plant is turned out. So when I got this plant, I actually thought that the root system might be a little bit fragile or very thin. I was wrong. It was not. The roots looked thick enough, so I decided I was going to give it a wash and I put it in my Leca clay bowls. Now, let's see what that all-important root system is doing. When you look at this plant over here, you can see that the roots have grown into the reservoir and they're looking really, really good. They're looking nice and white. I'm happy with that. So all in all, I'm really happy with how this plant has turned out. And I think if I had to have my time again, I would definitely use the direct method, wash it and put this plant straight into Leca because as you can see, it looks absolutely fantastic. So for this Farfugium plant, I would say that transition has been 100% successful. Next up is my Anthurium purple flower. Look at that gorgeous beauty. Look at those little purple flowers looking absolutely amazing. The leaves are fabulous. There has been, I want to say, zero leaf drop. Things are just looking gorgeous. Let's take a look at the roots. Look at that Anthurium root action going on. Oh my, it is so gorgeous. This plant is doing so well. When I got this plant, I immediately took it out of the soil and I knew it being an Anthurium, it was going to be a relatively okay transition. So I took the plant out of the soil, I washed the roots and I put it directly into the Leca, put it in this reservoir and my, oh my, I think that that was one of my easy transitions. I wasn't worried about this plant at all, and it hasn't let me down. Next up is my ZZ plant. This is my ZZ Jungle Warrior, and oh my goodness, I think out of the plants that Uprooted sent to me, I'm probably the happiest with this particular plant because, ZZ plants, are almost like succulent plants. They do not like wet feed. So converting a ZZ plant from soil into semi-hydroponics is always a little bit of a gamble, but I'm really happy with how this one has turned out because look at that. That is a new stalk right there that is coming, that has come, and there is another little one all the way down there. It's a bit hard for you to see without all my Leca falling out. But there's a little new one coming there as well. It has done so well. I took this plant out of the soil and of course it had the usual ZZ plant. It was so tight in the pot situation going on there. I took it outside. I gave the roots a wash, removed as much of the organic matter as I could, and I put it straight into this 14 centimeter pot in the Leca clay bowls and I gave it a reservoir. Now I know a lot of people get a little bit nervous about giving a ZZ plant a reservoir. So with me, I always give it a very little nutrient solution right at the bottom. So my roots are actually not touching the nutrient solution. A lot of people don't give it a reservoir at all. They use what's called the shower method. So they'll put it in the Leca and they'll just keeping that Leca moist. Just, run it under a tap or put nutrient solution until it runs through and that Leca stays moist. They do that every so often, every few days, so it doesn't stay dry. I don't like to do that because I know I would kill it because I don't have the discipline to keep coming around every few days. So I do this and it's worked really well for me in the past. And honestly, I am so happy with how things have gone. Let me show you the roots. Look at that. Look at how things are going there. There is a lot of root action going in there. And actually, when I squeeze this pot, it's actually already quite tight. It's quite tight, not exactly the way I started. So you can tell that there's already a lot of root action going on inside that pot outside of what we can already see here. So yes, my ZZ Jungle Warrior transitioned to semi-hydroponics, Leca specifically, so easily without skipping a beat and growing. For a plant that's said to be slow growing, it's given me 2 stalks in 30 days. Let's look at something a little bit more exciting this time. This here is my Oxalis triangularis plant. This is the plant I was the most nervous about, quite honestly. And I did say that I was very nervous because the root system is as fragile as anything. But look at this beauty, just so majestic. And I remember I did say that I'm pretty sure I would lose the flowers, but look at those gorgeous little flowers looking so amazing. This plant, of course, there's been some loss, right? So you can see things like this, that. Really, it's to be expected. You know, I mean, you wouldn't think that a plant like this one would transition into semi-hydro without any issues. But, you know, and I think, to be quite honest, even if this plant was living in soil and I just left it exactly the way it was, those leaves and flowers were probably going to do exactly what they've done right now. So I'm really happy with this. Now, for this plant, I did something a little bit different. I used my no wash method. Because the roots are so fragile, I was very concerned that if I took it outside and gave it a wash, all the roots would get washed away and my plant would not have enough time to recover for day 30. That's not to say it's not possible to do. It is possible to do by washing the roots, right? But I had a deadline, I had a timeline, and I needed to come back to you at day 30 showing you a plant that looks like this, because otherwise I would be completely misrepresenting semi-hydroponics. Now, the thing that is a little bit different with this plant as well, though, is that I didn't use Leca clables. I used my mineral blend. This is my mineral blend substrate that I get from a place called Habit Plants here in Melbourne. So if you're in Melbourne, Habit Plants have a good mineral-based blah, blah, blah. I'll have all that in the description below, but this is what I use as a substitute for pon. So if you've got pon, that's what you would be using. And there you can see that's what's happening down there, and that's sitting in a reservoir that's in a submerged setup. I have tried growing an Oxalis triangularis in Leca before, but I found that the Leca it didn't give the roots as much moisture as I think they needed. So I moved my plant to a mineral-based substrate like this one or like pon, and it did so much better. So for plants with very thin roots, I prefer to use that method, and it works really well for me. So I'm quite happy with how things have gone with this particular plant. And you know, the Oxalis does tend to get a little bit dormant. So we're coming to the end of summer right now. So I expect within the next few months, this plant probably is not going to be looking like this, but it will come back as it starts to warm up. But yes, the plant I was most nervous about looks absolutely stunning. Let's look at my Schefflera plant, shall we? And that is my gorgeous little variegated beauty. She looks just beautiful. She is intact, just dancing the night away. And she's living in Leca clables. This one, again, I wasn't quite sure what the root system would look like, so I was a little bit iffy at the start. But when I unpotted this plant, I saw that the root system was decent enough. Those roots were quite firm, so I took it outside, gave it a wash, and put it directly into the Leca. I was not concerned at that stage. And honestly, looking at the growth that this plant has given me right now, you can see what it looks like there. I think I was right in my not to be concerned thing. And you can see there is some new growth there. It's really tiny. It's so tiny, but it is growing. And the roots, oh my, the roots, look at that. Roots are intact. This plant is really happy. I have to say, this has been a successful soil to Leca transition. Schefflera, amazing. Let's look at my Cercestis plant. There we are. I love this plant. It is so beautiful. The leaves on that are just amazing. Now, this has been another success. I have to say, it has gone really, really well living in Leca clay bowls. This is another one. When I took it out of the soil, the roots were looking pretty decent. So I gave it a wash and I put it directly into the Leca. And I have to tell you, it has not skipped a beat, because look at that. It is actually stalking and starting to give me some new growth over there, because this plant actually does like to climb, which is something I don't want it to do at all. So in thinking about what I'm going to do, I don't know. I might cut that, or maybe, I was thinking I could probably wrap it around and put it back in the Leca so it starts to grow. But I don't know. I really don't know what I'm going to do with this, because I don't want it to climb. I don't want it to get to the mature stage. I want it to stay like this, lovely and bushy. So I might have to do a lot of propagating, cutting and propagating and putting back into the pot so I can have a lovely bushy pot, because it's a bit hard to sort of, pull that so that it can go down to the Leca. Let me show you the roots. The roots are beautiful. Look at that. Look at how that is. It's just beautiful. Look at this big one down here. It is just doing so well. So I think I can safely say that for this particular plant, the transition from soil to Leca has been successful. I know you're probably wondering, whatever happened to my Begonia Maurice Amey? Here she is. This plant has shocked me, surprised me. I am so flabbergasted, because I didn't think it would look this way. But first, the casualties. There has been some leaf loss, that is just completely dried off, and I kept those just so you can see that this is normal. This is normal, and this will happen, right? So there. Those are all sort of dried off, fell off, but look at this here. That is new growth coming right from the base. That is new growth on that stem. And there is absolutely new growth right there. That there is new growth. That there is new growth. There is a lot of new growth on this plant that I am completely surprised about. I am really happy. Now, for this begonia, for a plant like this, and I know begonias have got very, very thin leaves. Thin roots, we know this. And so with begonias like that, or plants like that, like my Oxalis triangularis, I would probably not wash it at this stage. But I wanted to wash it just to show you what could potentially happen if you did wash it. Also just to prove a point, if it did work, that it actually can work if you wash a plant like that. So I took it out of the soil and I washed the roots, and I remained with very little roots, and I put it directly into the Leca. Now, let me show you the root system. You can see the roots over there. They're so thin, so thin, but they have grown, and this plant has done really well. So it is possible to get a plant with very thin roots, wash the organic matter off, put it straight into Leca, and it will do just fine. So I'm really happy with how my Begonia Maurice Amey has gone. I did not expect it to look like this on day 30, but there we are. Begonia Maurice Amey successfully transitioned from soil to Leca. Let us look at something that went on a moss pole. This is my Monstera Adansonii variegated. That's my little Monstera albo over there. Looking really, really good. Still alive, living on a moss pole in Leca clay bowls. So for this particular plant, it was much smaller when I got it actually. It is so much bigger now. For this particular plant, I washed the plant and I put it on a moss pole and I put it directly into this Leca, and it has started to grow. And I think I actually don't have any cables or trellises, what do I want? Clips. I don't have any, Velcro plant tie or clips holding this plant to the moss pole, because it has actually, the area roots have attached to that moss pole, and it's doing really well. You can see there's new growth coming there. It looks absolutely beautiful. Now for this one, I can't really say, trying to see if I can see any obvious roots on the outside. I can't say I can. I don't see any obvious roots on the outside, but really, I don't need to see any roots in the pot to know that this plant is doing well, because as I said, there's lots of new growth. The plant has attached to the moss pole, and I'm pretty sure a lot of those roots that I'm looking for are inside this moss pole. I put it on this little clear, tiny moss pole. This one is a moss pole by the Leafy Brand. If you're interested in getting something like this, there is a link in the description below. But I think it really offsets this plant so beautifully. I don't have a big moss pole at the back that's shouty. It allows this little beautiful plant to just shine. This is another plant. This is my Geogenanthus plant. I had never owned anything like this before. This plant challenge is throwing me plants I've never looked at before, never owned before. And it's so interesting to sort of navigate the space of trying to get a plant I've never worked with into semi-hydroponic with a timeline, because all you people are wanting to see what happened. But this is what she looks like now. When I got this plant, it was pretty small. It wasn't as big as this. So there's been a lot of growth that's happened. Living in Leca clay balls, I took it out of the soil, washed the roots, and I put it directly into Leca in a submerged setup. And voila, voila, voila. There's lots of new growth. There's quite a fair bit of, it's a bit hard to show you there. That is new growth over there. It's doing really well. There's been some loss. That's a little leaf there that's sort of fallen off, but I'm generally happy with how things have gone. There's not much to talk about in the root department, and that's okay. You know, I don't need to see the roots in the pot to know that my plant is doing well. So yes, this is I don't know. I might keep this. I don't know. Now, this is a lot of plants. You might realize that this is a lot of plants, right? Uprooted gave me 10 plants. So for example, ZZ plant, I already have a ZZ Jungle Warrior. I have a ZZ Raven. I have so many ZZ plants. I can't keep this plant. In all honesty, I can't keep all of them. So if you have any idea of how I can get these plants to homes that will love them, let me know in the description below. And of course, bearing in mind that I am in Melbourne and I probably would not want to be shipping off these plants into other states, because there is a whole, you have to be certified to send plants to other states now, which I am not. So ideally, I would love to hand them over to someone who's living in Melbourne, or who can come and pick it up in Melbourne somewhere. Let me know a fun way of getting the plants to the people who would love to have them. This is my Rhaphidophora pertusa. Look, that is new growth there. This plant has done so well living on a moss pole in Leca clay balls. This is another one that was a lot smaller when I got it. I took it out of the soil, washed the roots, and put it directly into Leca. I put it on a moss pole, of course, and it is doing so beautifully. Now, I still have this Velcro plant tie that's on here, and I'm pretty sure that is not needed anymore. There. I've taken that off, and you can see I'm trying to tug at that plant. I'm tugging at it, and it is not moving. I also have a little clip there that we don't need at all, and I'll show you why we don't need those things. Boom. Look at the back of this plant. Look inside that moss pole, and you can see those roots. They are just amazing. When I was potting up this plant, when I was placing it on this moss pole, I actually got some of the area roots and I shoved them into there, right? So there were a few area roots that were growing off the plant. I shoved them into the moss tree fern fiber, and honestly, this plant is just laughing and loving life. But also, look at the base of that pot. There is just so much root action going on. It is amazing. So it is possible to transition a plant like this one. So this is a Rhaphidophora from soil to Leca directly. This is the direct method. I didn't use the long method. I put it straight into the Leca, and I just gave it a lot of light, gave it a lot of humidity, and put it on that moss pole, kept the moss pole moist. And keeping the moss pole moist allowed those area roots to actually grow in that moss. So this plant is destined for good and big things. This one here is the newest leaf. So it's, you know, this is, I think, I'm not sure whether this, I can't quite remember. I think this one and this one are both new leaves. But I think it's doing really well and it's going to absolutely love it. The thing that's interesting about this plant though, just a little tidbit, when you see it here, right, the internodal spaces are very, very tight. And that was when it was still living at the nursery. There was a lot of light, so, you know, the leaves were coming thick and fast. And then I'm guessing probably at this point is when the plant was shipped off to me. And then I did all my transitions. And so you can see how the internodal space, which is the space between that leaf and that leaf, that got a little bit bigger because I was doing all sorts of things to it. And so the plant was just like, yeah, I don't know what the hell is going on. So if I continue giving it good light, I expect that that internodal space is going to become smaller, go back to the way it was, and I'm getting new leaves thick and fast, close together, like it was right at the bottom. Moving these plants from soil to Leca, all 10 of them took a very long time. That video lives at thelecaqueen.com. Go and check it out. Watch this next video where I show you how I unboxed these beauties and what they looked like at the time. I'll see you there.